Dr. Seuss was an evil man. He was also the greatest author of all time, pioneering absolute bangers for books such as Hop on Pop, The Cat in the Hat, and so much more. He's won countless awards and achieved numerous amazing accolades within his 87 years of life. His books live on to this day and will likely live on forever. And to put this in simple terms, Dr. Seuss was amazing. He was so amazing that not only did he write amazing books, but he cheated on his wife during her serious illness, created racist cartoons, and even created erotic art. Hi, I'm Siah, and I create weekly commentary content on whatever I find interesting myself. Today, we will dive into the dark side of the legendary man behind the Cat in the Hat. Dr. Seuss wrote perfect books. I remember in my prime elementary school days reading his books over and over. The colors were great, and the rhymes were always going bar for bar. I remember the art was so simple, yet pleasing to my little 7-year-old eyes. These books were the iPad of the early 2000s, and while we didn't have TikTok, we had Dr. Seuss. We also had Captain Underpants with Flipporama and Diary of a Wimpy Kid. In the 1990s, we were taught genuine social interaction. We played outside, we drank hose water, and with social interactions being important throughout history, a person often cared about first impression and how they were perceived. To support that claim, I just now learned that Dr. Seuss, first of all, was not actually a doctor. That's right. You and I have been fooled our whole lives. The man that was once seen as a legendary doctor is not a doctor. He was actually born as Theodore Geisel, so yes, his first name was not Doctor either. He used the doctor label in order for him and his work to be taken more seriously. Already, this man was a phony. However, his lies worked. As you can tell, it did indeed give his writing and work more credibility. And while I thought he was a brilliant doctor of some sorts my whole life, now I think about it, his whole life was fabricated. Dr. Seuss also wrote Green Eggs and Ham from a dare, and that dare came when he was challenged by his publisher to write a book using only 50 different words. We're all learning that he didn't desire to write children's books. After all, he was in school to be a professor. The problem was, his doodles and his notebooks were too great to overlook, and the person that noticed his talent was later to be wife. The most critical information of all that I want to highlight was that Dr. Seuss cheated on his wife. Helen Palmer was Dr. Seuss's first wife. Having met at Oxford, she had huge influence on his life. She was the one to convince him that he should be an artist instead of an English professor. And being the founder and president of Beginner Books, she was also a children's book writer and editor. She married Dr. Seuss in 1927, and their marriage lasted up until the day she passed away. Sadly, her passing wasn't that peaceful, as she actually ended her time on Earth through her own will by overdosing on barbiturates, which if you don't know what barbiturates are, they're a sedative and sleep-inducing medication. Normally not given to people due to how strong they are. I mean, that is how Michael Jackson passed away. Helen was sick for 13 years starting before her tragic passing, but her immune system was already weakened because when she was a child, she had polio. She did recover, but over time, she later developed partial paralysis from Guillain-Barré syndrome, and then eventually developed cancer. Helen unfortunately just couldn't keep up with the fight forever. And on top of her being sick, she was also depressed as she was consumed by her suspicions of her husband's affair with his soon-to-be next wife. Before she felt it was time to transcend into her next life, she left a final note to Dr. Seuss reading the following. Dear Ted, what has happened to us? I don't know. I feel myself in a spiral, going down, 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 into a black hole from which there is no escape, no brightness, and loud in my ears from every side I hear failure, failure, failure. I love you so much. I am too old and enmeshed in everything you do and are, that I cannot conceive of life without you. My going will leave quite a rumor, but you can say I was overworked and overwrought. Your reputation with your friends and fans will not be harmed. Dr. Seuss didn't care, as he got married 8 months later after Helen's passing to the lady he had an affair with. This man was an absolute weirdo. And while I think it is okay and healthy to move on from a past relationship, for him to throw 40 years down the drain is downright wrong and horrible. His second wife, Aubrey Geisel, did not have as bad of a life as Helen, but Aubrey wasn't perfect. Aubrey knew that Dr. Seuss was married, yet still committed to a relationship with the man. Was it the money? Was it the status? Was it that he was an artist? Because I know any of those three things will snag anyone's girl. Imagine back in the 1900s, you with your girl, right? Y'all just sitting there walking and walking, and some dude comes up and flexes a painting on you.
She belongs to the street.
Aubrey wrecked everything that Helen had built up. And through time, Aubrey later became the holder of all of Dr. Seuss's creatures, his estate, and his life earnings. When Dr. Seuss passed away in 1991, he granted Audrey full ownership of The Grinch and The Cat in the Hat, and taking care of the creatures was her top priority. Audrey went on to develop and oversee a worldwide operation of films, books, games, and celebrations that contained the famous Dr. Seuss name. But rumors had it that her aggressive commercialism and work ethic went beyond what Dr. Seuss had wanted. But if you pay attention, you'll see that commercials is something Dr. Seuss enjoyed doing. After all, if we go back in time, we can discover that Dr. Seuss was also known for doing commercials or advertisements. And the commercial wasn't your normal Old Spice body wash or Doritos Super Bowl commercial either. His work was more political. I'll just flat out say it. Dr. Seuss was a racist. I don't know how he managed to transition from racial propaganda into a story about green eggs and ham, but he transitioned between those smoothly. And he actually created cartoons during World War II. And honestly, I would have never known that he was a racist. In his newspaper works, he often attacked Japanese people. In his artwork, he would give them squinty eyes, make sure they all look the same, give them stubbly facial hair, and even buck teeth. And while he didn't just attack Japanese people, they definitely had it worse in other countries. Germany was not seen nearly as bad as Japan in his art, as his art about Germany mainly targeted Hitler. His racism boiled so deep that he even designed racist ads involving black people. This ad he created was meant to be for pesticide, you know, the insect killer. But his work for the pesticide company involved caricatures of black people. Unfortunately, a lot of his work was also drawn for the New York paper, so his work was seen by the masses. But eventually with time, Dr. Seuss did feel bad for his work. He visited Japan in 1953 and witnessed the aftermath of the Hiroshima bombing. That experience humbled him, which I believe would humble anyone. America attacked with a force so big and unnecessary that Hiroshima still is kind of recovering to this day from the attacks. They're a lot better now. They should have never been hit that hard to begin with. The bombs did in fact instantly kill 80,000 citizens, and after the experience, he felt he needed to atone. So he decided to atone exactly how you expected him to. He atoned for his anti-Asian rhetoric by writing the book Horton Hears a Who. And to unaware kids, that book is about an elephant that has to protect a speck of dust populated by tiny people. The ultimate message of the book was that a person is a person no matter what, and the kids loved it. I think the book's true representation, in my opinion, is that America is the elephant and Japan's the dust. We should protect them rather than attack them. This was the first and last bit of genuine emotion that this man seemed to have felt. If you didn't know, Dr. Seuss also attempted to write erotic stories because he actually didn't like children much. And I mean, as you can see, he never had children. The only children in his life were his stepchildren. He also wrote a cartoon with the following story, and the wolf chewed up the children and spit out their bones. But those were foreign children, and it really didn't matter. Now, that's odd because he excelled with children's books. If I Ran the Zoo was also a very racist book, which is why you can no longer buy it, but that book was racist. Along with creating books for children, he chose to have gone sexual. Dr. Seuss signed a contract with Random House Publishing, which allowed him to publish an adult book, which I heard he poured his heart, soul, and probably a little bit more. In the book, The Seven Lady Godivas. The unfortunate part is that when he published the book, it was not received well, as the sexy women that he's seen as beautiful were drawn to look just like the funny looking creatures in his other books. I don't know where he thought that would appeal to the masculine audience, but I'm sure there's that one interesting man that was satisfied by the curves of pop from Hop on Pop. Dr. Seuss's life did eventually get quiet. He produced 60 books over his lifetime, and most of us were able to witness some of his greatest stories. I Can Read With My Eyes Shut, Oh, the Places You'll Go, The Pocketbook of Boners. Those are just a few books that demonstrate how amazing he was. When he passed, he was worth $75 million, and in the 1990s, that's a lot of money. Karma eventually did catch up with him, as he ended up getting cancer just like his wife that he cheated on, and with time it won its battle. There's no denying that he had a legendary career, but nobody's perfect. It just goes to show that we're only shown what the world wants us to see. And had I not made this video, a lot of you probably wouldn't have even known that Dr. Seuss had a dark side. At least he didn't plagiarize his work, unlike these YouTubers from my last video. So be sure you check that out.